Somewhere near you right now, there's a building doing about $711,000 a week in sales. Every week. No slow season. No, we're waiting on Q4. Just cash. Relentlessly. Forever. That's the average American supermarket. Roughly $37 million a year through a single store. And I want you to hold on to that number because in about 90 seconds, I'm going to tell you what the owner actually keeps. And it is so much smaller than you think that when you hear it, your first instinct is going to be that I misread it. I didn't. Let's say it's yours. Let's say you did it. You signed the lease, you took the loan, you built out the refrigeration, you hired 40 people, and this morning the doors opened and you are now the proud owner of a grocery store. Congratulations. You have just bought yourself the single most punishing business model in retail. And you're going to spend the rest of this video finding out why anyone in their right mind would do it anyway. Because here's the thing that makes grocery so strange. It's not that it's a bad business. It's that it's a bad business that a handful of operators have turned into an unbelievably good one by realizing the store isn't actually what they're selling. Start with the money coming in, $37 million a year. Now let's start taking it away. The first thing that goes is the food itself. Cost of goods sold in grocery runs somewhere around 70% of every dollar. So of your $37 million, $26 million or so just leaves. It was never yours. It belonged to Kraft and Tyson and the produce distributor the whole time. You were just holding it. That leaves you a gross margin of about 21 to 25%. Call it $9 million to run everything. Now, labor. You need cashiers, stockers, a butcher, a produce guy, someone in the deli at 5 in the morning, managers, and you need them at 6 a.m. and at 10 p.m. and on Christmas Eve. For a well-run independent, labor lands somewhere in the 12 to 18% of revenue range. On $37 million, that's $4.5 to $6.5 million. Gone. Then rent. Then the electricity bill. And understand that a supermarket is essentially a giant machine for keeping things cold, running 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Then insurance. Then credit card processing fees, which quietly skim a percentage off literally every transaction you make. Then the loan payment on the refrigeration you financed, because commercial refrigeration alone can run you $35,000 to $100,000 before you sell a single banana. So what's left? According to FMI, the food industry's own trade association, the average net profit margin for a food retailer is about 1.7%. 1.7. $37 million of other people's money moves through your building, and you keep roughly $629,000. And I need you to feel how thin that is. If your electricity bill goes up, if a competitor opens down the street and you have to drop prices 2% to keep your customers, if your refrigeration compressor dies in July, any one of those things doesn't hurt your profit, it eats all of it. There is no cushion. The entire business runs on a margin thinner than the sales tax you pay at the register. Which raises the obvious question. If the margin is 1.7% and everyone in the industry knows the margin is 1.7%, why does Kroger have 2,700 stores? Why is Aldi opening 80 to 100 locations a year, funded entirely out of its own cash flow? Why are billion-dollar companies fighting each other to build more of a thing that barely makes money? Because, and this is the part almost nobody outside the industry understands, a lot of them are not primarily in the business of selling you food. Think about what a supermarket physically is. 42,000 square feet, 30,000 different products, shelves in the eye line of every single person who walks in. And in America, the average household walks into one about 1.6 times a week. That's not a store. That's real estate. That's the most valuable, highest traffic advertising surface in the physical world, and it happens to have food on it. So grocers rent it out. It's called a slotting fee. If you're a food manufacturer and you want your new hot sauce on the shelf, you don't just show up with hot sauce. You pay. Getting a single new item into a regional cluster of stores can run around $25,000, and in a high-demand market, it can climb toward $250,000. Want it at eye level instead of down by your ankles? That costs more. Want it at the checkout? More again. And then there are promotional fees and display allowances and pay-to-stay fees to keep the space you already bought. The Federal Trade Commission looked at this practice and described it as widespread in the supermarket industry. And buried in that same body of research is a line that I think is the single most clarifying sentence in all of grocery economics. Many grocers make more profit from agreeing to carry a product than they do from actually selling it to you. Read that again. The transaction at the register, the thing you think the whole building is for a meaningful chunk of the inventory, not where the money is. The money was made months earlier in an office when a brand manager wrote a check to rent 4 feet of shelf. And in the last few years, this got dramatically bigger because grocers realized they weren't just sitting on shelf space. They were sitting on data. Every loyalty card swipe, every app open, every online order. Decades of it. Who buys diapers? Who switched from Coke to Pepsi? Who's pregnant, probably, based on the lotion? So they built retail media networks. They became advertising companies. Brands are now spending tens of billions of dollars a year buying ads on grocery apps, grocery websites, and screens inside the store itself. Retail media spending is projected to top $129 billion in the US by 2028, roughly a quarter of all US media spend. When Kroger and Albertsons were pushing their merger, one of the numbers they waved at investors was a projected $1.5 billion in what they charmingly called alternative profits. Not profit from groceries, profit from adjacent to groceries. Which sounds like a magnificent loophole, a low-margin business quietly bolted to a high-margin advertising business. And it would be, except for one thing. The building is still full of food, and food rots. The industry word is shrink. Shrink is everything that goes into your store and never becomes a sale. Theft, sure, that's the part that makes the news. But in grocery, theft isn't even the main event. Research from FMI and the Retail Control Group found that roughly 64% of supermarket shrink comes from breakdowns in ordinary store operations. Not criminals. Ordering too much. Marking down too late. Misweighing. Bad rotation. Somebody stacked the strawberries in a beautiful pyramid and 40% of the pyramid liquefied. Store-wide, shrink typically runs somewhere in the 2 to 3% range of sales. Do you see it? Go back to the number. Your net profit margin was 1.7%. Your shrink is bigger than your entire profit. That means in the average supermarket, the value of the product that spoils, breaks, walks out the door, or gets rung up wrong exceeds everything the owner takes home. Shrink isn't a line item. Shrink is the business. And the difference between a grocer who's making money and one who's quietly dying is very often just 100 basis points of shrink control. And where does it come from? Overwhelmingly, the fresh departments. Perishables account for around 65% of total store shrink, while being only a bit over a third of sales. Meat is the worst single offender, somewhere around 18% of the store's total shrink. Produce is next, around 16%. Deli and bakery run shrink rates north of 8% of their own sales. Compare that to dry grocery, the canned goods, and the cereal, which sits down around 1%. So the logical move is obvious, right? Get rid of fresh. Sell shelf-stable food that never dies. Cut your shrink to nothing. Print money. Except that's the trap. Because the departments bleeding you dry are the exact departments that get people in the door. Nobody drives past 2 other stores for your canned corn. They drive for the meat counter, the produce that actually looks fresh, the rotisserie chicken. Fresh is not a profit center. Fresh is bait. And the whole store is built around that idea, which is why the layout you've walked through 10,000 times is not an accident. Milk is at the very back. Not because that's where the coolers fit, because milk is the thing you came for, and the walk to get it drags you past $40,000 of things you didn't. The bakery vents its smell toward the entrance. The produce is at the front because it's colorful and it makes you feel good, and it makes you feel like you're at a market. The gross margin on packaged goods might be 25%, but the gross margin on ready-to-eat, on the hot bar, on the prepared foods case can approach 60. So they walk you past the cheap stuff to reach the necessity and hope you grab something expensive on the way. Which brings us to the thing that actually keeps this whole industry alive: The thing that explains why, despite everything I've just told you, grocery chains expand relentlessly. It's the float. A grocery store turns its entire inventory something like 15 to 20 times a year. Kroger runs around 17. Costco moves a shipment through in about 27 days, and its suppliers are on net 30 payment terms. Sit with that. Costco sells your cereal, collects your cash, and holds that money for 3 days before it has to pay for the cereal. Multiply it across a whole store, across an entire chain, across a year, and you get what's called negative working capital. You are running an enormous business at scale using your supplier's money as the operating capital and pocketing the timing difference. That's why grocery is such a strange animal. Terrible margins, beautiful cash flow. It is a cash machine wearing the costume of a food store. And once you understand that, every weird thing about the industry snaps into focus. Take Costco. Costco marks up its merchandise about 11%, roughly half of what a normal supermarket does. It caps markups on national brands at 14% by policy, as a matter of near religious conviction. And it does that because it isn't trying to make money on the food at all. Costco's membership fees are around 2% of revenue and account for something like 73% of gross profit. Merchandise sales essentially cover the cost of running the warehouses. The profit is the membership. Costco is not a retailer with a membership program. Costco is a membership program with a warehouse attached to justify it. Or take Aldi. A conventional supermarket carries over 30,000 items. Aldi carries around 1,400, almost all private label, in a store less than half the size. Fewer SKUs means simpler ordering, less shrink, faster turns, brutal purchasing leverage over the few suppliers left. They stock straight from the shipping case, so nobody's paid to face a shelf. You rent the cart with a quarter. You bag your own groceries. Every single one of those things you find mildly annoying is a labor cost that Aldi has surgically removed and handed back to you in the form of a lower price. And it works so well that Aldi funds its entire US expansion, 80 to 100 stores a year, out of internal cash flow. Or Trader Joe's, which runs about 4,000 items, over 80% private label. No sales, no coupons, no loyalty program, in a store a third the size of a normal supermarket, and does an estimated $2,000+ per square foot a year, against $600 to $800 for a conventional grocer. 3 completely different companies. One identical insight. In a 1% margin business, you do not win by selling more. You win by removing cost from the system and by finding a second, better business hiding inside the first one. Which is exactly why the newest threat to grocery is the one that looks the most like progress. Online grocery, delivery. It feels inevitable. It feels like the future. And research out of Wharton found that fulfilling those orders can require up to 125% more labor, because someone has to walk your aisles, pick your items, bag them, stage them, and drive them. In a store, the customer performs all of that labor for free. Grocers, in the main, haven't been passing that cost along. So every online order is, structurally, a more expensive way to sell the same 1.7% basket. The researchers' conclusion was blunt. Scale is not going to fix a physical reality. So, should you own a supermarket? Here's the honest math. You're looking at $300,000 to over $1 million to open a real one, most of it disappearing into refrigeration, build-out, and inventory before a single customer walks in. Most independents don't hit true profitability for 18 to 39 months. And when you get there, you're running a $37 million operation for a $600,000 return in a business where a 2-point swing in shrink erases your entire year. But there are 63,000 of these stores in America, moving nearly $1 trillion a year, employing 2.8 million people. And demand for them has never once, not in a recession, not in a pandemic, not ever, gone away. People eat every day, forever. That's the trade. Grocery is not a business that makes you rich on margin. It's a business that pays you in certainty, a stable, recession-proof, cash-generating machine, and then charges you an extraordinary operational tax for the privilege of running it. The winners aren't the ones who sell the most food. They're the ones who figured out what else they're actually selling. Shelf space, data, memberships, time. The food, it turns out, was almost never the point. If you found this video valuable, leave a like, subscribe, and comment below which business you want me to cover next.